When you go to a restaurant in Korea and you're not sure what to order, especially if it's a new place or it's a hot pul, or as you would say in Korea, which stands for hot place, because Koreans love to shorten things like Starbucks is subok. You might ask the server, 뭐가 제일 잘 나가요? Which means what goes out the most. And if you listen to any K-pop, especially from older years, relative to anyone, 내가 제일 잘 나가, 내가 제일 잘 나가. It means that I go out the most, which means like I'm popular. And last year I did an episode of the top most impactful books of the year and the most important lessons I learned. And it was one of the most Chair Tarnaga episodes of the year. So I thought, in the spirit of popularity and also reflection, and also serving you in that if there is something that interests you, you might want to dive deeper into or give you some ideas. Or if you're like, I don't want to read all of these books, just give me the Cliff Note versions. This is my Jer Charanaga episode for you of the books that I've read and the lessons I've learned from them. If you listen to that episode, I talk about how I've started a spreadsheet called Learning Map, a Google's spreadsheet in 2022, and I write down the book I read, the author, the lessons I've learned, how to use it to help other people, and any notes, key lessons, how I can help myself, key actions to implement, blah, blah, blah. In 2022, I read 38 books, 2023, 37, 2024, 21. What was happening in 2024? And then in 2025, matched 2022 with 38 books about. And so out of those 38 books, I'm going to share some of the most influential 8. I'll give some honorable mentions at the end. Most of my genres are related to spirituality or my work. So things around body liberation, sometimes fitness and health, and relationships. I love learning and reading about relationships, specifically romantic partnerships. So there's some of that in here. I'm going to start with associated memories, the biggest lessons I learned from those books. And most of these books have some quotes for you to take away with them. All right, so we're going back. You ready? You ready? Nyanyi, are you ready? My Nyanyi girl is sitting on my lap and my Jayu baby is sitting next to me on the desk. So we're in good company here. Get a little bit comfortable. See if you're holding any tension in your body. Maybe relax a little bit. And let's go on this journey together, this journey of books. And by the way, if there is something that stands out to you, I'd love to hear. If you have some books that were really influential for you this year that stand out to you as you're listening, I would love to hear. You can connect with me using the links in the show notes. I would love to hear your thoughts. So we're going back to January 2025. And by the way, Happy New Year. I know that this is coming out at the end of December 2025. It's the last episode of 2025. And I will be taking a break for an unspecified amount of time starting from January. So you can go back and have plenty of time to listen to old episodes. There are, including this episode, 124 total episodes. I'm also happy to see that this year my podcast grew. It reached more audiences, more countries, more cities, and I appreciate you all so much. So keep sharing, keep listening, keep rating it high, and come and do the work with me. All right. Okay. So back in January, I remember January was kind of a tough month. I was going through a hard time personally, but I wanted to run. I just felt like running. So I went to a gym in the neighborhood and I started listening to this book in that gym. So memories associated with this is like running 6 something miles per hour on an old treadmill in a gym. Infinite Receiving by Susie Thomas. And Susie Thomas is kind of in the business world, so I got some business wisdom from her. But this idea of being able to infinitely receive good things, and just listening to her expanded my ideas for what is possible for me. And what I learned the most from this book is that what I want and having what I want is becoming more of who I already am. So my desires lead me to more deep and full expressions of who I am. I also practice what she taught about sitting with emotions and letting them pass through you. And I guess this was a start of me not being so afraid of certain emotions and just letting them happen. She also had some cool exercises around emotions because it is such a big part of growth, your emotions and dealing with them. And just how she approaches the world and business with so much openness and possibility was inspiring. So if you're ready for big leaps in your life, if you're ready for more growth, I recommend this book, Infinite Receiving by Susie Thomas. She's also not a white author. She's from the UK, and it was refreshing to hear a non-white person on Audible, and she reads it herself, which was cool. Fast forward to February. I'm intrigued with the idea of manifestation, which I have been for a while, but even more intrigued. And I had just discovered Neville Goddard. I have premium Spotify so I can listen to audiobooks. I'm on a plane or getting ready to go on a plane to Mazatlan, Mexico, which ended up being a wonderful trip. And I download the book, Neville Goddard, The Complete Reader. And honestly, there's a little bit of Neville recordings and a lot of some Australian woman speaking. And I wasn't as much of a fan. I think listening to it once, her commentary was helpful, but listening to it again, I just liked the Neville Goddard parts. If you're not familiar with Neville Goddard, he's like a pretty big name in manifestation. He talks about living in the wish fulfilled. And this year I've kind of been obsessed with manifestation and how to create change and how to create your life. And it has reaped some good rewards, and you'll see a little bit more of that. But I have memories of walking from my Airbnb to the beach, eating tacos, 3 for $5, or actually 3 for $3. I have memories of sitting on the rocks by the beach and on the sand by the beach and doing these meditations that are in the book. And two things that stood out to me, two quotes that I took with me and really rode with for the rest of the year and shared with friends is, and there's an episode entitled this in my podcasts a few months back. Imagine better than the best you know. Imagine better than the best you know. And I love this idea that things and life can be better than what you already know. We can expand, we can grow. Life gets to be so good. That's another phrase that I've held and rode with this year is it gets to be so good for me. It gets to be so magnificently, blissfully good. It just gets to be. I get to decide that. There was one time where I think I had gone to the beach and I was walking looking for food, and I just kept replaying it. Imagination creates reality. Imagination creates reality. And it took me back to being a child and playing pretend with my little dolls. And this inner knowing that I had, that inner imagination does create reality on some level. And I would refine that statement based on what I've learned since then. But just this idea that what we perceive as reality comes from our projection in our minds and our consciousness, and we can choose what we project in our lives. I remember walking on the beach. I was like deep into self-reflection on this trip. I needed it. I was going through a hard time, same hard time as this infinite receiving gym running time reasons. And I just decided, as I was walking on the beach, I decided and I wrote down that I'm loved that I'm loved, that I am family, that I am adventures. I like embodied it and identified with it. And on the way back from this trip, I remember writing profusely all the things that I want more of in my life. I was so hungry for more. And once I landed, that adventure kind of began. And I had a wonderful spring and summer afterwards. And life has been good. There's been ups and downs, but I would say life has been so good. So this idea that you can just be certain and create and decide and then watch your reality reflect it. Imagine better than the best you know. Next book that was really influential, and this is more on the, I guess, self-development side, but I learned so much and it's helped the way that I relate to myself and even with others. It's called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. What motivated me to read this book was finding out from Michaela, who is a guest on my podcast. You can search the episode. I highly recommend it. It's called Reclaiming Yourself, Healing from Religion's Impact on Food and Body Image. She's a therapist, and we had a great conversation back in March, so you can search that up and listen to it. She talked about how this parts work was really started by this guy, Richard Schwartz, as a way of helping people with eating disorder recovery. And doing that in my work, I was really interested. So you might have heard of IFS, maybe by some therapists, internal family systems. This was started by this guy, Richard Schwartz. And what I really took home from this book is that we have different parts of ourselves. So it's not like identity dissociative disorder, although that could be maybe an extreme manifestation of that. We have different parts of ourselves, and we have protector parts, we have parts that are scared, we have childhood parts, and they are neither good nor bad. In fact, they are here to help us. And so many times when we have fearful parts, or we have parts that get angry or that get protective, we tend to resist them or shun them. But when we can see them as trying to protect us, trying to help us, trying to love us, then we can come to them as a wise self who can love them and care for them. And that wise self lives in all of us. So Richard Schwartz believes that we are naturally compassionate, curious, confident, clear, creative beings. That's our true nature. And sometimes we let these parts take over, and that's when things get out of balance and out of whack. But if we can come to those different parts of ourselves with love and wisdom and like, hey, I'm going to take care of you, kind of having that, hey, I'm here, positive parent energy, then we can live in more balance and have more love for ourselves and for others. So here's a quote from this guy. IFS, and it's going to be a little bit heady, and it talks about attachment theory, but if you can get it, it's really helpful. Okay, so I'll take a breath. Ready? IFS can be seen as attachment theory taken inside, in the sense that the client's self becomes the good attachment figure to their insecure or avoidant parts. I was initially amazed to discover that when I was able to help clients access their self, they would spontaneously begin to relate to their parts in the loving way that the textbooks on attachment theory prescribed. This was true even for people who had never had good parenting in the first place. Not only would they listen to their young exiles with loving attention and hold them patiently while they cried, they would firmly but lovingly discipline the parts in the roles of inner critics or distractors. Self just knows how to be a good inner leader. Self just knows how to be a good inner leader. And when you can access that part of you, beyond the scared parts or beyond the critics, you can lead yourself with compassion and care and, when appropriate, loving discipline. So I recommend that book, especially if you feel like you're struggling with certain parts and you feel like you can't change. The other thing in the next two books, are around body liberation. Aubrey Gordon, if you've listened to Maintenance Phase, it's a really popular podcast. She does it with this guy named Michael. I don't know his last name, but he did what was that podcast with a Sarah? Something about like what you thought you knew, but you don't really know. I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't recall. But Aubrey Gordon does Maintenance Phase with this guy named Michael. And she wrote this book, You Just Need to Lose Weight. She also appeared on the documentary around The Biggest Loser. And I did a podcast episode on that too. You can check that out. The documentary about The Biggest Loser. I did an episode on the documentary and my thoughts on it. So I started doing this because I wanted to examine and undo my own anti-fatness and discrimination, internalized discrimination, especially in the work that I do and for my own life. And this is associated with summer walks and bike rides by Lake Monona, by my house. I just remember it was June when I read this book or listened to this book. So I just remember walking by the lake, it being kind of warm, taking bike rides and listening to Aubrey Gordon's voice. What I learned as someone who lives in a bigger body and grew up living in a bigger body, who tried all the diets that didn't work, I learned more about the internal experience of someone who is in a bigger body and how offensive so many of our ideas and even comments and attitudes are towards fat bodies, how hypocritical anti-fatness is at its core. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's hypocritical. I also realized how, fat phobia could be kind of a negative term, and I've since switched to using anti-fatness, and how dangerous it really is. Like, it's not just like, oh yeah, we need to have more diverse models in our marketing campaigns. It goes so much more beyond that in the medical field, in daily lives. And I'm obsessed with this stuff. But I also learned how it's not always tied to trauma. Living in a bigger body doesn't mean that you had sexual trauma or that you're trying to hide yourself or other reasons. This is a side note, but I've realized how much in the spiritual world and in the health world, we associate weight loss with progress and evolution, and how extremely harmful and negative that belief can be. It's might be correlated sometimes, but it's not causation. So you may happen to lose weight on a healing journey. You may happen to lose weight after, letting things go, but to think that that is required or a necessary result of healing is so damaging. Sometimes and oftentimes, gaining weight is absolutely a sign of health. So that's just a side note, but I want to put that in there. Some of her quotes, I have two quotes from Aubrey for you that I agree with wholeheartedly. All of us deserve peaceful relationships with our own bodies, regardless of whether or not others perceive us as happy or healthy. And a diet is a cure that doesn't work for a disease that doesn't exist. If you are trying to undo some anti-fatness, both for yourself and for others, this is a highly recommended book. There were maybe one or two points that I did not personally agree with, but so eye-opening and helpful. How are we doing so far? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, which means we're halfway through. Any of these books stand out to you? Are you still waiting for one that just really hits home? Next, Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. This was recommended to me by Aubrey Gordon in that book, in her book about You need to just lose weight, the 19 myths about fatness. This reminds me of drives in the car, cleaning my house, showering, kind of hearing all these names in my head and thinking about all the vast history of racism in our country and beyond, because she goes back all the way to Europe. If you want to know why you feel oppressed or never enough in your body, especially if you are in a bigger body or you are a person of color or you are not a quote unquote proper white person, please listen to this book. Even if you get like the gist, because she goes into details. She gives dates, she gives specific names. She did so much research for this book, and it just speaks to how unbiased it is. So much, I'm banging my head as I say this, so much of our beauty standards are rooted and based on white supremacy, racism, and misogyny. So men hating women, basically. You're not crazy if you've ever felt like your body was not enough, if you've ever felt some ounce of oppression from your being in your body. And this book really uncovers how the ideas that we have of beauty and what beauty is and isn't have been instituted and perpetuated by mostly powerful white men who had some say and wrote things down and told people, this is what I think. So basically, mansplaining in the old ages. You know how, okay, not all men, we make a sense for that. But I've noticed, and I've shared this with some friends, that usually when guys know something, they want to say everything about it and they say it as fact, they say their opinions as fact, and they want you to know what they think. That hasn't changed because a lot of white men would say, basically, this woman has a beautiful body, and I don't like this detail about her body. And black woman, blah, 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 blah. And white woman should, blah, blah, blah. Blech, blech. Birthing. Blech. There were also white women who perpetuated these ideas, and people can be hard on women, and I understand it, but they perpetuate dangerous ideas, but I don't blame them when you are not in the position of higher power. But there were a lot of women writers, magazines that came out who would talk about, if you want to be a proper woman, if you want to be accepted by society, make sure you exercise self-control and don't be fat or don't be too fat. And it was just, when you listen to this book, you can sense how so much of this is the same. A lot of it hasn't changed. It's just different wording and a different time frame and different mediums. Fuck. Fuck. So I wrote down in my notes, I said, Black people have been racialized to be promiscuous, bizarre, and lacking self-control. That's kind of how white people have seen them through the ages. And of course, you have to come up with all of these justifications to enslave another human being. But I wrote down in caps, be fat. And you don't have to gain weight if that's not your genetic predisposition. But if you are fat, embrace it. It's kind of like the biggest F you to all this. Be fat and be embodied. I talk about it, about being rebellious in the last episode, is like how much I admire people who are embodied in bigger bodies, especially in this world, without shame for their bodies. Like that's the most empowering thing. And it is kind of sad to see people who've embraced that, like celebrities and famous people, singers who have lost weight. It's like, oh, you too. That's how I feel. You too. Here's a quote from this book. And this just gives vivid imagery for what she says. Obesity kills more Americans than we thought. This headline from the health news section of CNN's website on August 15th, 2013, commanded readers' attention. Accompanying the article is an image of a fat Black woman. She is wearing a sleeveless top, revealing the dark, fleshy skin of her arms. A tape measure around her waist is being held together by a pair of delicate white hands reaching out from a white lab coat. Say less, Sabrina, say less. Right, we're shifting gears here from body liberation to I have three more books, and maybe I said eight and they're really nine. Oh well, I'm bad at counting these things. I'm including this book. I like to read a lot of relationship books, but I'm reading this one because I read it so fast and it was full of ideas that I hadn't learned before. And after I learned them, I was seeing connections all around. And by the way, a lot of these books have correlations. So there's a theme that I'm going to share at the end. But Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendrix. It's kind of a classic, apparently. I just didn't know about it. I saw it at a Room of One's Own, a really cool queer bookshop in my neighborhood. It was used and it was on sale. So I was like, oh, I want the love I want. I'm going to get love I want. So I'm going to read this book. I remember reading it on the couch. I remember going to Young Blood, if you're in the area, on North Street, and reading it there. And I wrote down in my notes of things that I learned. And here's a quote. I just wanted to sit on my parents' lap longer. To summarize it, I just wanted to sit on my parents' lap longer. But to go a little bit deeper, we are often attracted to partners who reveal hidden parts of ourselves, maybe parts that we suppress or that we wish we would have more of, kind of like yin and yang. That's why opposites seem to attract. Or they contain traits that would tend to parts that we didn't get met in childhood. So he breaks down how we are often, when we are unconscious in relationships, we're basically little children looking for a parent, and how we want a partner to meet our needs, how we want them to praise us for parts of us that weren't acknowledged, and how when we evolve into conscious relationships, we're not deciding just out of blindness, but we're deciding consciously how we can meet our partners as an adult with another adult, rather than looking to them to parent us. And that's where we have more healthy relationships. And this goes back to the IFS thing. I also listened to Richard Schwartz's book related to IFS and relationships. It's called You Are the One You've Been Looking For, or something like that. And it mirrors some of the concepts I learned in here. Something else that was really beautiful that I learned from this book is the more you love another, especially the parts that you don't understand. So like your partner receives love in a way that maybe you don't receive it or express it. The more you can love them in that way, the more you are loving yourself, because you are loving undiscovered parts of you. So when we love another, we are in fact loving ourselves. And I liked the idea that he gave that commitment is the foundation for growing love, and how there's some measure of commitment and trust required to be able to grow with another person. And he has a beautiful quote that I will share with you, and then I'll go into the last two books. Okay, let's take a breath. Helen and I, that's his wife, Helen and I like to think of two people in a conscious love relationship as companion stars. Each person is a unique individual, ablaze with potential. One is just as important as the other, and each has a unique and equally valid view of the universe. Yet together they form a greater whole, kept connected by the pool of mutual love and respect. They mirror the interconnected universe. Mic drop. Thanks, Harville. Harville and Helen Hendrix. What a cool couple name. All right, this is more recent, though. I just finished, or I have like 5 minutes left in this book, but I just finished these last two books. So again, being obsessed with creation and manifestation, if you want to call it that, and how to create change in your life. I am doing his meditations. I've listened to his books in the past, but I just got intrigued with Joe Dispenza again. And I decided to listen to his book, Becoming Supernatural. And I will say there are some woo woo things, and I take things like this with a grain of salt. And more research is out to be done with some of his theories. But that doesn't mean that it's not valid at all and not helpful at all. That's at least my philosophy with things. So this reminds me of walks in the neighborhood, listening to this book. And my desire for starting this was wanting to create better in my life. I started with his meditation. So from October, pretty much October 1st, right after my birthday, I started doing these love meditations. And oh my God, did they work? Yes, they work. Did they work? No, I meant that. Oh my God, did they work? That's it. There we go. So they worked. I'm not AI, I promise. I just focus basically like how he teaches is like you kind of go into nothing, you relax, and then you just focus on a feeling. And I was focusing on love and joy and possibility. And I feel like I called so much incredible love in my life from lovers and friends and family even. I'm still benefiting from doing those meditations. I did them every day for maybe a month and a half. I did that love meditation, sending out lots of love to people in my life, whether they're presently active or not. Yeah. And I've done other ones of his. I really like his pineal gland meditation. And something I learned it from this book is how much power we hold in our bodies. And I know it feels woo woo, but like clearing the energy in our bodies. And really, there's not like any special ritual that you do. It's just bringing attention. So, in the pineal gland meditation, for example, you focus on your hips, around your belly button, your gut, your chest, your throat, the back of your head, the middle of your head, the top of your head. And just bringing, really simply, just bringing your attention to these parts and noticing the energy in these parts of your body is so, so powerful. I really felt my body change. And I know that sounds extreme, but this is my experience. I felt my body change to be more clear. I felt like I could see all of these synchronicities happening in my life from these meditations, and I still practice them. I try to do one a day. Most days I do them still, or at least get into that place of nothingness where I can create. And it's just amazing. I love life. Life is good. I love life. Here are some quotes. I'll give you two quotes and then I'll move on to my last book and tie things up with the bow. The only way we can change our lives is to change our energy, to change the electromagnetic field we are constantly broadcasting. In other words, to change our state of being, we have to change how we think and how we feel. That's the premise of this book. We usually expect things in our outer experience to change before we can change, but that's the opposite. When we change our state of being and how we think and how we feel from the inside, we see it reflected back to us. We're so powerful. This is why in my work, I say you are worthy and you are powerful. You are powerful to create the life you want. And I talk about this more in the 4-H method. So come join us. And the next quote, if you can't get beyond your stresses, your problems, and your pain, you can't create a new future where those things don't exist. So we like to focus on our stresses. We like to focus on our problems. We like to focus on our pain. And there's validity in all of that. I'm not saying that they don't, to like just completely ignore it. But when we focus so much on it, we're repeating it. And if we can get away from circumstances and get away from the noise of everything around us and just go within. And that's something I learned even from the Neville Goddard book, the power of just going inward and being with yourself. It's so powerful. so beautiful. And I've experienced this year, and it's just like the most amazing gift. Most amazing gift. Last one, Unshaming by David Bedrick. One of my clients actually read this, and I was like, oh shit, my client read this. I got to read this too. This is good. I remember this is associated with driving to and from work, commutes to see people I love. And really, the premise of this book is that the parts of ourselves that we often shame or shun or resist actually hold the most profound medicine for what we need to heal. And so much of that is in our body. So somatics has a part to do with this, even the IFS part. The body holds wisdom, and the way that our bodies move when we express our undesired parts can reveal what we're needing. And so he does a lot of somatic work with his clients. Like, for example, if this part of you that you're resisting or not enjoying, or that feels like a problem, if it were to speak, how would it sound? If it were to move, can you make that expression with your hands and make it bigger? And you can see patterns like, oh, this part of me wants to run away, or it's wanting to push something. And then in that, you can see the strengths. So David Bedrick is a master at unshaming parts of ourselves that we shame. And he talks a lot about society and how there's body shame and social shame, and that relates to fearing the Black body, and you just need to lose weight. You made it with me through this journey. If you've listened so far, thank you so much for your time and energy. Nyangi is also here listening to me, and Jayu. So in the least, I have 2 listeners already. And thank you if you're my 3rd or 4th, 5th, 6th, 10th, 20th, 30th, 100th. I noticed a theme in all of these books that stood out to me this year, which is accepting all parts of ourselves. The parts that are deemed unlikable or ugly, the parts that we don't like, the parts that feel challenging and difficult, and not only accepting them, but embracing them, getting curious about them, leaning into them, listening to them, because those parts hold wisdom and medicine and information. And sometimes we neglect certain parts of ourselves, but when we can tap into, like the Joe Dispenza meditations, tap into those different parts of our bodies, literally, we can access more power, more openness, more energy, and more of what we really want. And not just for ourselves, the parts that we don't like in ourselves, or all the parts of ourselves, but all the parts of others as well. And the more that we practice compassion for ourselves, the easier it is to practice compassion with others. Some honorable mentions, because if you're like, damn, Michelle, I listened to this whole thing and I don't even like one of these books. I don't want to listen to any of them. Or I've like, I've listened to these books. I hope that there was at least one that piqued your interest that you might dive into. But if you would like some more ideas, here are some honorable mentions, okay? So I read 38 books and I just shared 8 or 9 with you. Here are 6 more that I would recommend to you. Well, most of them I would recommend. Number 1, Chill and Prosper by Denise Dunfield Thomas. She writes the foreword for Infinite Receiving by Susie Thomas. No relation there as far as I know. Chill and Prosper, especially if you're a business owner. She talks about how you can relax a little bit more in your business and make things easy. She has a really nice accent, Australian accent, and great way of talking. And if she might resonate with you. So especially if you're a business owner, I recommend that. The Body Never Lies by Alice Miller. I devoured that book from the library. It's basically about how sometimes forgiveness is not the solution. Sometimes we need to honor the parts of us that don't want to forgive things done to us as children, and how we hold things in our bodies. Again, it's related to the other stuff that I talked about. It Begins With You, Jillian Turecki. I listened to it right when it came out. I downloaded it, also associated with walks in my neighborhood. And that was a really good book for me taking more responsibility for my own part in relationships. This was a fun one. I have a memory of sitting in Domestique. It's a coffee shop in the neighborhood, the one on Willie Street, and reading this book and just being so excited and inspired. Transurfing in 78 Days by Vadim Zeland. He's a Russian author. Transurfing, it's just basically like a different way of framing manifestation. And I like his idea of pendulums. So check that out. French Windows by Antoine Lorraine. This is on here because it's my only full fiction book that I started and finished this year, at least so far. As you can tell, my books are all nonfiction. And someone I love, who loves me, recommended this and got this for me. And it was fun. It was fun to read. And then the last one, The Body is Not an Apology. I finally read this classic by Sonia Renee Taylor. And basically, she talks about how we are love, radical love. That's who we are, and our bodies deserve love for ourselves and in society. Once again, thank you for going on this journey with me. I hope this inspires you. Not your typical kind of Christmas, New Year's fitness material, but hey, I think we need something different in our world sometimes. I hope that this inspired you, and I cannot wait already. I cannot wait for the first recording to come out in 2026. I honestly don't know when, because I'm going to take a break and listen to my body, and my body will let me know when I'm ready. My brain, my heart, and my body will let me know. And I can't tell you when that will be, but I cannot wait for 2026 and all the wonderful things that I will share with you. Go back and listen to some good episodes in 2025. Search a word in the search bar that just appears in your mind and see if I have an episode on it, or scroll and see if there's anything that piques your interest. I like you and I love you and I appreciate you so much. Happy New Year and happy listening/reading.